in contemporary comics, graphic novels, visual storytelling, whatever you want to call it, there really are two distinct camps. One is the writer-illustrator. You know, I think it's the Harvey one has a cartooning award. They call that cartoonist to do both, and the other is somebody who writes and has a collaborator who does the drawing. I think these are obviously very, very different experiences. And so in talking about how one creates a comic book, I think these are two perspectives, and I think we both gave us some really nice insight into the difference of how that works. And really interesting to me that you're both talking very much about cinematic language, or you television, but cinema. That I mean, there's visual storytelling, but then it really does seem that more and more in film and TV, the storyboards they're using have become more and more like comic books. And I'm wondering, how different is it when you're thinking about a static image versus a moving? I mean, that's obviously with film you've got music, you've got sound, you've got all kinds of other ways to cue the audience as to what's going to happen. You can control the movements of what's happening. With a comic book, you've got to find another way to slow somebody down when you need them to be sort of really paying attention. You've got to find another way to sort of give these cues. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about using the visual language without any of those other sound effects. It seems that to me is the unique thing about a comic book, is that how close it is in some ways to film and television. But for me, it's a far richer experience because it's immersive in the same way that a book is, that it draws the reader, and you have to supply as a reader a lot. And you as creators have to sort of help us get the effect that you're after.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I never, it was a really tricky thing, and actually I asked when I first started writing if I could see a script, and they sent me one of Bill Willingham, who's a comic book, I think he writes Fables. So they sent me one of his, which I was like, this is so genius. They just sent it over. But he has this very, like, you know, he talks all about pans, and it's like you use the sort of movement language to talk about these sort of static, like you sort of talk about like a pan being this like sort of stretched out panel across, you know, the top of the page, and everything is sort of, you know, ECU, extreme close-ups, and sort of overhead shots and stuff like that. I think the thing that I found really tricky, and I didn't think of it as movement, I really do, I guess I talk about them as these sort of static in terms of as, you know, I think of them as sort of frames. But the thing that I had a really tricky time with was transitions. Like, how do you move from the end of one scene into something else? How do you move from the end of one movement into something else? And I just basically went and watched all my favorite movies and saw how they went from one shot. Like, how do you end a scene? Like, obviously you can fade to black and then fade back in, but how do people do it? And it is the sort of other, it's not a lot of American cinema makers who do the best at those. But it was really fascinating to see how filmmakers do it. I mean, you know, to sort of borrow what they do and stuff like that. But yeah, it's not easy, as I would say. The other thing I think is that you read comics and you see how they do it. Like Jason Lutz, who's this amazing graphic novelist, writes conversations in this way that incorporates, it's like you said with the sort of person sitting on a couch, and you sort of have these little shifts in the image, even though it's just sort of the static image in some way, but there's like little changes. And Jason Lutz writes conversations in a way that you actually feel like you're watching a conversation on a film. Just he uses so many more panels, but it's got this like, you know, this like textured effect when he does it. It's amazing. It's like you have to read comics, I think, to also learn how to do that.
Yeah, just on that same topic, are you starting with a kind of a storyboard? Are you sketching things out, or did you have I mean, how did you approach combining the? I mean, yours is there's very little text. I mean, there is text, but it's really the images carry the story, the momentum moving along. So I'm guessing that you would have started with the images in terms of how you wanted the story to unfold a little bit. No. So how would you do?
I'm quite surprised you know that I wrote it down at first.
You did? So did you do like a script sort of?
No, I would just think of what I wanted to talk about, and I would write it out. I think it's because I always have to have the language there to give me my limits somehow. And then the images go more toward the feelings of what I'm trying to convey. And I don't know why that is, but I have boxes and boxes of really bad descriptions of things that happen in stitches, which I won't ever show to anybody, but which will probably make some wonderful archival material one day. Yeah, for me, it's got to be open words first.
It is amazing though, because the thing with those descriptions is nobody reads them. So in a way, like I knew that my editor was going to read them and the illustrator was going to read them. So in a way, it's like, it's hard to just, it's very flat sometimes to just describe what it's, a two-panel scene in which a girl is running from like her house to her friend's house. And you're like, I can't believe I have to write this out, like it's ridiculous. But then you're sort of like, I would edit and fix them up because I was embarrassed about sort of sending these ridiculous paragraphs. So then I would spend all this time editing them because I was like, someone's going to read them sometime. Like I couldn't put them in a box. So I would just like, you're toiling over something that only 2 people, it's like a PhD. You're toiling over something that only 2 people will ever read.
You keep all your notes in front of them?
Yeah. I find it hard to throw them out. I don't know what that is. I feel like it's, like mentally I think, or emotionally I feel like it's part of the story. So I have every draft of Skim. I have every I have every notebook I ever used just because I'm almost like, I'm attached to them, like they help me create the story.